Ladies and gentlemen, there are three important points of contact that make it possible to speak of yoga and the modern depth psychologists in the same context. First, there is the idea that the fate of the individual is a function of his own psychological structure and attitude. He brings about for himself those events that he thinks come to him. The second point is the idea that all of the imageries of mythology and religion are functions of the psyche, projections of the psyche. All of the gods, the heavens, the hells, are within you. And the third point of contact is the belief and the experience that the psychological attitude can be transformed through attention to the imageries of myth and to what seem to be the accidents of one's destiny. Furthermore, in the case of Jung in particular, there has been a direct influence from the Oriental disciplines of yoga. They came to him through his own independent researches, but also through the association with two very great Orientalists, Richard Wilhelm and Heinrich Zimmer, both of whom were intimate friends of Dr. Jung, and from whom he received, you might say, the interpretation in depth of these images in a manner that was in accord with the Oriental positions. Now this evening I'm going to stress the line of the Kundalini Yoga, indicating what seem to me to be some essential analogies and distinctions to be drawn when we look to the psychologists. To begin then, the basic work of yoga is a text known as the Yoga Sutras, the thread, the sutura, the thread of yoga, which is attributed to a semi-legendary sage, Patanjali, who is supposed to date from, well, you know how the Indians are, centuries and centuries and centuries ago. 3rd century BC would be the ultimate date we could give him, but the text reads like something considerably later than that. However, the ideas that are involved in the text are infinitely old. The first evidences we have of yoga come from the Indus Valley period in 3 or 4 seals that show figures seated in yoga posture, in one case with 2 serpents up the sides of the seal, and these suggest the theme of the Kundalini, the serpent power that is to be brought up the spine, and of which I'm going to speak this evening. Now the word yoga is from a Sanskrit root that means to yoke, to link one thing to another. In this case, what is being linked is our consciousness, our waking day consciousness, being linked to the source of consciousness, so that we should live out of the source of consciousness and not out of the limited consciousness of our daylight personalities. The aim is something like the aim that is expressed in St. Paul's words when he says, I live now not me, but Christ in me. However, in the Christian view, no one could say, I am Christ. At least that would not be regarded as an orthodox statement. However, the whole goal of yoga is to realize that you are. One is to image one's, what is called the Ishtadevata, one's chosen image of ideal divinity. It can be Christ, it can be the Buddha, it can be Shiva, it can be Vishnu, it can be the goddess, and one is to identify oneself with that image. Now in our Western traditions based on the Bible, where the divinity is regarded as outside of the cosmos, ontologically distinct from it, God and world, creator and creature are not the same. No one can say that he is God. In our religions, we attempt to establish a relationship to the divine usually through an institution which is regarded as having a divine source. This requires acts of faith, belief in the historical thesis or origin myth of the religion as a literal fact, that Moses did communicate with God on Mount Sinai, that Christ was God, did found the church, and guaranteed that it would remain true to his purpose. However, in the Orient, the notion is not that we are only to relate ourselves to the divine principle. We are to discover our identity with it. The key word is that of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Tattvam Asi. You are it. You are that divine principle yourself which you seek. However, not the you that you regard as the temporal, limited you. That is not it. Neti, that is not it. You must go past the whole realm of intellectual and imaging categories. The ultimate mystery of being cannot be spoken about, cannot be defined. It lies beyond, it transcends all categories of thought. And yet it is that very being which is your being. One can take anything, this watch, draw a ring around it, forget that you know how to use it. What is it? The mystery of the being of this object is exactly the same as the mystery of the being of the universe. The whole mystery is right here, or it's in any stick or stone or dog or cat. Anything can be dissociated from its concept context and regarded in the dimension of its mystery. And there's only one mystery. Now to return to the Yoga Sutras. The first aphorism of the Yoga Sutras is the key to this whole business. It is as follows. Yoga is the intentional stopping of the spontaneous activity of the mind substance. Yoga is the intentional stopping of the spontaneous activity of the mind substance. The idea here is that within the gross matter, the gray matter of the mind and of our nerves, there is a subtle substance, sukshma, a subtle substance that takes the form of our experiences, and that's why we experience them. It is sympathetically responsive to our experiences. As we look around here, this subtle matter in our mind, this subtle mind stuff, takes the form of what is before us, and that's why we experience it. Now, when you move your eyes very quickly, you can see how rapid this is in its changing of form. The difficulty is that it won't stop changing form. Try to hold in your mind for a brief period, a few seconds, a single image, a single thought, something that you think you could devote yourself to in thought for a long time. And you'll find that within a few seconds, you are having associated thoughts. That is to say, your mind won't stand still on that one point. Yoga is the intentional stopping of the spontaneous activity of the mind. Now, why should one want to do that? The mind is compared to a water surface rippled by a wind. You know the first verse of the Bible? The wind of God, the breath, the Spirit, brooded over the waters, ruffled them. Let that wind depart. Let the waters rest quietly. When the wind is blowing, the waves break up the images, and all one sees are broken fragments. But when the water stands still and has been cleared of sediment and is perfectly clear and mirror bright, One sees then perfectly reflected the clouds, the trees around the shore, and one sees down to the sandy bottom and the fish there. One sees that one image of which all the broken reflections are simply the broken reflections. This is the world image. This is the ultimate image of which all are participants, are particles, so to say. And that is the Buddha form, the Dharmakaya, the form of the law, which is the goal of yoga to bring you into connection with. Now you can stay fixed to that one image, in which case the rippling world drops off. Or one can open the eyes again and let the wind come and blow, and one knows that all these forms, all of us, are broken reflexes of that one of which we are, each of us, an entire manifestation. Now the great yoga that I want to speak about is the Kundalini. This is a late form of yoga that developed probably in the Gupta period and thereafter, perhaps 5th century A.D. The idea is of a coiled up serpent power. The word Kundalini means coiled up at the base of the spine, as though the serpent were biting its tail and not outward turned. And the goal of this yoga is to wake that serpent and bring it up the spine. And on the way up, there are 6 centers through which it goes until it reaches the crown of the head. So we have 7 centers, the base, and then the 6 on the way up. And at each stage, the entire psychological structure becomes transformed. There was a great saint in the last century, Ramakrishna, who was a kind of virtuoso in bringing the Kundalini up the spine. His devotees would say, "Oh, Master, how does it feel when the Kundalini comes up the spine?" Well, he said, "Well, sometimes it feels like a serpent slithering up, sometimes like a mouse running up, sometimes like a monkey jumping from branch to branch. And as it comes, each of the chakras or centers, these are called lotuses, padmas, is hanging loose. And when the energy strikes it, it opens up and shimmers. Oh, Master, how is it at the second chakra, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and so on?" And the Master would explain, but as he would get above the 4th, he would pass out in trance. Now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go all the way up the line. Being a mere scholar, I can do that. One is to sit in perfect balance. A very important point here is that the mind, manas, the mind power, and the life energy or emotion power, prana or breath power, are the same. When you are angry, your breathing changes. When you are in repose, your breathing changes. When you are fired with passion, your breathing changes. The breath, prana, is the active principle. And so one of the first exercises in all yogic enterprises is what is called pranayama, the breath control. By steadying the breath in a certain way, one steadies the mind in an accordant way. Now this breathing is a little bit strange. One is to breathe in through the right nostril. And imagine the breath going all the way down the back, down the spine, clearing a channel. Then when it gets to the bottom, start it out the left nostril. And then breathe in through the left nostril and out through the right, meditating all the while, Om, Om, Om. I'll be explaining Om in a minute. And clear these channels. And in this way, not only do you steady your mind down, but you aerate the whole nerve system, at least this is the theory, and you begin to rouse that serpent. Now it's astonishing to read some of the details of these yogic exercises. The yogi can feel the serpent stir. but he knows it isn't awake yet. So he will lift himself on his hands and then slam down on his tail like that and rouse this thing. The coincidence of the spiritual and the physical in Oriental thinking is so intimately close that you can hardly separate them. Well, now the serpent's going to start up, and I'm going to try to describe the psychological structures, and it's here that we're going to begin to see the relationships to our psychologists. The first chakra at the bottom, I won't bother spelling these out for you. You can find them in any book about yoga. The first chakra is called Muladhara, which means root base. Here, as I say, the serpent is biting his tail, hanging on. There is no zeal for life. There is no joy in anything. There is simply grim avidity hanging on to life. I think always of dragons when I think of this. You know how dragons are. They have curious little customs. They like to guard things, and their favorite things to guard are gold and beautiful girls. They can't make use of either, but they just hang on. And this is the way the Kundalini and the spirit is at that point. Just won't give up, won't let go, can't enjoy life in any of its play, just dogged, I'm alive and I don't like it. That sort of thing. Now when the psyche is roused, when this Kundalini spirit starts moving up, the next center, center number 2, the lotus number 2, is at the genitals. And this is called Svadhisthana. By the way, the serpent is a feminine serpent. Her favorite resort is the meaning of Svadhisthana. Here, one's whole zeal for life is sexually oriented. One's sense of achievement, one's sense of frustration. At this level, I think we can say the psyche is Freudian. This is Freud's reading, as I understand it, of the psychological energy, that it is essentially erotic in its character. The third station is called Manipura, and that means the city of the shining jewel. This is at the level of the navel. And here there is a zeal to eat, to consume, to turn everything into oneself. This is the will to power chakra. And this is the level of the Adlerian or Nietzschean psychology, that the main drive of life is to win, to incorporate, to engulf, to consume and turn into oneself or into one's own. Now these 3 chakras, 1, 2, and 3, are the levels of man living in the world in his naive state. These are the direct primary chakras or energy centers of animal man, you might say. And the normal way of controlling animal man is socially, through social disciplines. And so, on this level, social organization, social disciplining is necessary if people are to live in decency with each other. Otherwise, you have these bunch of ravenous sex pots and winners in the world turning everything into themselves. Now we come to the 4th chakra, which is the chakra of transformation. This is the chakra of the Buddha seated under the Bo tree, the tree of illumination. That tree is called the immovable spot. It is that point at the center of the turning wheel of time, or the turning wheel of the universe, where the opposites come together. You have what Jung calls the coincidence of opposites here. This is a main theme in his thinking. Desire and terror, or fear, or aggression come to an end here. They are extinguished. And the reason they are extinguished, and this is a very important point for the whole Oriental system, is that sense of ego has been wiped out. The key activity is egolessness, acting and learning to act without a sense of ego. The future Buddha is seated under this axis of the world here, this world tree at the immovable spot around which all turns. And there comes to challenge him, to tempt him at this spot, the Lord of the world. And the name of the Lord of the world is desire and death. These are the second and third chakras, the chakra of lust and the chakra of aggression. And this Lord of life says to the young prince beneath the tree, he approaches him in the attitude of the Lord of lust. And he parades before him his three beautiful daughters, whose names in some of the versions of the story are desire, fulfillment, and regrets. Now, if the Buddha had thought I, he would have seen they. There was no ego there. There was no I there. There was no point of separateness there. There was no reaction, consequently. Now, we're not told how the girls felt about this, but we are told how Kama, the Lord of lust, felt about it. He was incensed. He says he is not worthy of my daughters. So he turned himself next into the Lord of death, a horrendous figure with the necklace of skulls and bleeding heads, many heads of his own with tusks and fiery eyes. And he hurls at the sage seated there his army of the wildest monsters you've ever heard or thought of. And they fling at the prince no end of bizarre weapons, whole flaming mountains, oceans of mud, and all this kind of thing. And in the sphere of the nobody there-ness of the Buddha, these become simply lotus petals of worship. Then, frustrated, our Lord of the world becomes the sociologist. The third controlling power is dharma, virtue. And he says, young prince, what are you doing sitting here, ducking out? You should be in your palace, governing the world, fulfilling your dharma, your duties to society. The only answer possible, the Buddha made, without a sound. He simply let his right hand touch the earth. And the goddess Earth herself said, "This is my beloved son. Through many lifetimes he has given of himself, given of himself, given of himself. He has come to and found the immovable spot." With that, the elephant on which the Lord of virtue was riding bows, and the army is dispersed, and in the night the Buddha achieves illumination. Now we're going to try to do it. We have arrived at the fourth chakra. It is at the level of the heart, and its name is Anahata. And that, freely translated, or rather amply translated, means the sound that is not made by two things hitting together. Now, what would that sound be? You've all heard the Zen query. What is the sound of one hand? The sound that is not, all the sounds that we hear are made by two things striking together. My voice is the wind striking the larynx cords. The sound that is not made by two things striking together is the sound of the energy of the universe, out of which all things are precipitations. It is antecedent to things. And that sound, guess what? All you have to do is cover your ears and you'll hear it. It's Om. Now this sound, Om, is allegorically analyzed in the following way. In Sanskrit, the sound O is analyzed into two syllables, A and U. So we have A, U, and M. Om. That's known as the four-letter word. The A is pronounced at the back of the throat, ah, and then you bring it forward, ooh, and then it closes at the lips, And if properly pronounced, it has pronounced all the sounds. It has filled the whole mouth. So that all words are simply fragments of Om, just as all images are simply fragments of that one Lord of the Universe image that we saw when the water stood still. Om is the God sound. It is called the Nadi, the sound of which all things are precipitations. In the Old Testament, chapter 1, when Yahweh decided to create a world, he made noises. People, for some reason, say that God created the world out of nothing. That's not true. He created the universe out of sounds, out of names. He pronounced what the Indians call the seed name, and then the object came into being. And so here, we now hear the sound of which the universe and ourselves are precipitations. And this sound is Om. Now, analyzed in a sort of allegorical way, Ah is compared to the whole world of waking consciousness. In this world, subject and object are not the same. They are distinct from each other. God and his world are not the same. They are distinct from each other. A is not B. Aristotelian logic prevails. Objects are gross. They are not self-luminous. They have to be lighted from outside. U is compared to the sphere of dream consciousness. On this level, the whole logic changes. Objects are of subtle matter, not gross matter, and they are self-luminous. You don't say, turn on the light, I want to see my dreams. The dreams are luminous of themselves. Furthermore, the subject and object are the same, though they look to be different. You are the dreamer, and you are the experiencer of the dream. You don't know what the dream's about? Well, you made it up yourself. There are two yous there, one in ignorance and the other in creative activity. These seem to be different, but are not different. Furthermore, since all pairs of opposites dissolve at this level, and anything can yield no end of meanings, subject and object, outside and inside, dissolve. This is the realm of heaven. This is the realm of hell. This is the realm of purgatory and the gods. The gods are simply cosmic aspects of dream. And mythologies are simply public dreams, dreams that have been guaranteed to be good dreams to have by the people who like them. You can have your own dreams, and your own dreams are your own mythology, and they actually are the mythology that is your destiny mythology. And if you can't get them into accord with the public preference, well, you know which to let go, I hope. M is the sphere of deep, dreamless sleep. Here, consciousness is still present with all the seeds of dream in it, but it is wiped out. It is occluded by darkness. This is the sphere that Northrop has termed, in extremely, I think, scholarly words, let's say, the undifferentiated aesthetic continuum. Here, objects are not separate from each other. The Indians speak of a mass of undifferentiated consciousness. Yet when it comes back again, you have the same old psyche there. It didn't get changed at all. As they say in the Upanishads, you go to that place, the place of the luminous, perfect light, every night. But alas, you're asleep. So the goal of our yoga now is to go to that sphere awake,